The Academy's training grounds stretched across kilometers of reinforced metal flooring, dotted with obstacle courses that defied conventional physics. Gravity wells, energy barriers, and temporal displacement fields created a gauntlet that would challenge even the most seasoned warriors from the galaxy's elite species. Cadet Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the starting line, her human features unremarkable among the assembled alien cadets. The Zenthari instructor, Commander Vexthal, towered over the group with his 4 arms crossed and crystalline eyes gleaming with barely contained disdain. His species had dominated galactic warfare for 3 millennia, their natural ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields making them nearly invincible in combat. Around him, cadets from dozens of worlds showcased abilities that seemed pulled from ancient legends. The Kyrian twins could phase through solid matter, while the young Drachmer noble's scales shifted color as he bent light around himself like a living cloak of invisibility. "Today marks your final combat assessment," Vexthal announced, his voice reverberating through multiple vocal chambers. "Each of you will face the crucible of trials, designed to test every aspect of your training. Your natural abilities, your species' gifts, your technological augmentations, all will be pushed to their absolute limits." His gaze swept across the diverse assembly before settling on Elena. "However, there is one cardinal rule that supersedes all others." The massive alien leaned forward, his presence intimidating even the most confident cadets. "No supernatural powers in combat. No telepathy, no elemental manipulation, no temporal distortion, no matter phasing. This exercise tests your fundamental combat skills, strategy, and adaptability. Your abilities are tools, not crutches. Today, you fight as warriors, not as walking weapons of mass destruction." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Zenthari's electromagnetic mastery, the Ethereal's reality-warping capabilities, the Void Walker's dimensional manipulation, all the advantages that made their species legendary across the galaxy, rendered useless by a single rule. Elena noticed how several cadets' confident expressions faltered, their reliance on inherited powers suddenly exposed as a potential weakness rather than an asset. "The human understands this better than most," Vexthal continued, his attention fixed on Elena. "Her species possesses no remarkable abilities. No natural weapons, no innate powers, no genetic advantages. They are, by galactic standards, utterly unremarkable." The words carried a weight that made several cadets glance at Elena with mixture of pity and curiosity. Perhaps this limitation will finally reveal itself as the handicap it truly is. Elena's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in her dark eyes. A slight upturn at the corner of her mouth, so brief that most observers missed it entirely. She adjusted the standard-issue combat suit that looked identical to everyone else's, her movements precise and economical. Where other cadets fidgeted with nervous energy or postured to display their confidence, she stood with the stillness of someone completely at ease. The first trial began with a maze of laser grids that required perfect timing and spatial awareness to navigate. Cadets who normally relied on precognitive abilities or enhanced reflexes found themselves stumbling through patterns that seemed impossible to predict. The Kyrian twins, stripped of their phasing ability, struggled with obstacles they would normally pass through effortlessly. Their frustration grew with each failed attempt, their coordination deteriorating as they tried to force solutions through brute strength rather than strategy. Elena approached the laser maze differently. She spent precious seconds observing the pattern, her eyes tracking the timing sequences with mathematical precision. When she finally moved, her path seemed almost choreographed. She ducked under sweeping beams, rolled through gaps that appeared for microseconds, and twisted her body through spaces that barely accommodated her frame. Her movements weren't enhanced by supernatural speed or strength, but they were efficient in a way that spoke to countless hours of practice. "Impossible," muttered Kithara, one of the ethereal cadets whose species could normally perceive probability streams. "She's moving like she can see the future patterns." Commander Vexthal watched Elena's progress with growing interest. The human navigated obstacles that had stymied cadets with far superior physical capabilities, not through power but through pure tactical thinking and precise execution. She completed the maze in the third fastest time, behind only a Zinthari cadet who had clearly been training without electromagnetic assistance for years, and a Drachmer whose natural armor allowed him to simply power through several barriers. The second trial shifted to a combat simulation against holographic opponents programmed with the fighting styles of various galactic species. Here, the disadvantage of the no-powers rule became more apparent for many cadets. The young Void Walker, Nexus Prime, found himself consistently outmaneuvered by opponents who should have been easy targets for someone who could step between dimensions. His fighting style was built entirely around hit and run tactics that relied on his teleportation ability. Elena faced the same holographic opponents with a different approach entirely. She studied each enemy's movement pattern for several exchanges, absorbing damage while learning their tells and weaknesses. When she finally went on the offensive, her attacks were surgical. She exploited blind spots, redirected momentum, and used each opponent's strength against them in ways that seemed to flow naturally from her understanding of leverage and timing. The holographic Zinthari warrior that had defeated 3 other cadets fell to Elena through a series of precise strikes that targeted the gaps in its electromagnetic field generation. The artificial Kyrian assassin that had phase-shifted through 2 other students' defenses found itself trapped by positioning that made its solid-state attacks predictable and counterable. Elena wasn't stronger or faster than her opponents, but she fought with a tactical awareness that seemed to anticipate their actions several moves ahead. "How is she doing that?" asked Zephyr, a wind-manipulating tempest whose fighting style relied entirely on aerial superiority. Without his ability to control air currents, he had been eliminated in the first round of combat trials. "It's like she's reading their minds. But that's impossible without telepathic abilities." Commander Vexthal found himself leaning forward, his 4 arms uncrossed as he studied Elena's technique with professional fascination. The human's combat style wasn't flashy or overwhelming. It was methodical, adaptive, and devastatingly effective. She made adjustments in real time, learning from each exchange and incorporating new information into her tactical framework with a speed that rivaled dedicated combat computers. The third trial introduced environmental hazards alongside combat scenarios. Gravity fluctuations, electromagnetic interference, toxic atmospheres, and unstable terrain created a multi-layered challenge that required constant adaptation. Many cadets who had performed adequately in isolated trials found themselves overwhelmed by the complexity of managing multiple threat vectors simultaneously. Elena thrived in the chaos. She used environmental hazards as weapons, luring holographic opponents into gravity wells and electromagnetic storms. When the artificial atmosphere shifted to a methane-based composition that impaired most species' oxygen-dependent systems, she adapted her breathing patterns and combat style to conserve energy while maintaining effectiveness. Her performance wasn't just competent, it was educational for observers who began to see environmental adaptation as a skill rather than simply a matter of species compatibility. The Drachmer noble, whose natural armor made him nearly invulnerable to most attacks, found himself struggling with coordination as shifting gravity fields disrupted his balance. Elena helped him adapt by demonstrating techniques for fighting in variable gravity, sharing tactical insights without any apparent competitive reservation. Her willingness to assist other cadets, even in the middle of a competitive assessment, drew attention from both peers and instructors. "She's not competing against us," observed Luminera, an energy being whose natural form had been contained in a specially designed suit for the trials. "She's competing against the challenge itself. The rest of us are just variables in the equation she's solving." The observation proved remarkably accurate as Elena's approach to each trial became more apparent. She wasn't trying to dominate other cadets or prove superiority. She was systematically deconstructing each challenge, identifying core principles, and developing solutions that could be applied across multiple scenarios. Her success rate wasn't perfect, but her learning curve was exponential in ways that defied typical performance patterns. As the day progressed, something unexpected began happening among the other cadets. Those who had initially viewed Elena with pity or dismissive tolerance started seeking her advice during rest periods. The Kyrian twins asked about timing techniques for navigating obstacles without phasing abilities. The young Void Walker wanted to understand how she predicted enemy movement patterns without precognitive abilities. Elena shared her knowledge freely, breaking down complex tactical concepts into understandable components. She explained how observation could substitute for supernatural senses, how leverage could multiply physical strength, and how understanding an opponent's limitations could create opportunities that raw power couldn't match. Her explanations were clear, patient, and devoid of condescension. "Your species really has no natural advantages?" asked Astrix, a young quantum whose people could manipulate probability fields. "No enhanced senses, no superior strength, no mental abilities?" Elena shook her head, adjusting her equipment as they prepared for the next trial. "Humans are pretty much baseline biological entities. Average strength, average speed, limited senses, short lifespans by galactic standards. We don't have any of the advantages that make other species formidable. Then, how are you doing this?" Astrix gestured toward the scoreboard where Elena's name sat in the top tier alongside cadets from traditionally warrior species. "You're outperforming people who should be physically superior in every measurable way." Elena considered the question for a moment, her expression thoughtful rather than boastful. "Maybe that's exactly why we develop differently. When you don't have natural advantages, you have to get creative. You learn to think around problems instead of through them. You develop techniques that work regardless of your physical limitations." The insight struck several cadets simultaneously. Species that had evolved with powerful natural abilities might have never needed to develop the kind of tactical flexibility that Elena demonstrated. Their advantages could become limitations when those abilities were removed from the equation. Commander Vexthal observed this interaction with growing respect for the human cadet. Elena wasn't just succeeding despite her species' limitations. She was turning those limitations into teaching opportunities that elevated the performance of her entire cohort. Her influence was making better warriors out of cadets who had previously relied entirely on inherited advantages. The fourth trial of the day introduced team-based scenarios where cadets had to coordinate their efforts to overcome challenges designed for groups rather than individuals. Here, Elena's unique perspective proved even more valuable. While other cadets struggled to adapt their individual-focused abilities to cooperative frameworks, Elena naturally assumed support and coordination roles that maximized team effectiveness. She positioned herself as a tactical hub, providing real-time analysis and strategic recommendations that allowed teammates to apply their reduced capabilities more effectively. The Zinthari cadet who had been struggling without his electromagnetic abilities found new effectiveness when Elena helped him understand mechanical leverage and timing-based combat techniques. The ethereal twins discovered that their natural energy manipulation, while restricted from direct combat use, could be applied to environmental scanning and team coordination. "She's making us better," realized Kithara as their mixed-species team achieved the highest completion rating of the day. Not by doing everything herself, but by helping each of us understand our own capabilities from new angles. Elena's approach to leadership was notable for its collaborative nature. She didn't issue commands or demand deference. Instead, she offered observations and suggestions that team members could accept or reject based on their own tactical assessment. This created an environment where everyone contributed their expertise while benefiting from her strategic framework. As the trials continued, a pattern emerged that went beyond individual performance metrics. Teams that included Elena consistently outperformed groups of individually superior cadets. Her presence seemed to multiply the effectiveness of everyone around her, creating synergistic effects that couldn't be explained by simple addition of capabilities. The day's final trial was announced as a free-form combat scenario where cadets could choose their own approach to a complex tactical situation. A fortified position held strategic resources that needed to be captured and held against waves of increasingly difficult automated defenders. Most teams immediately began planning direct assault strategies that relied on overwhelming force or specialized abilities. Elena studied the scenario parameters with the same methodical attention she had applied to individual challenges. After several minutes of analysis, she proposed an alternative approach that surprised everyone, including the instructors. Instead of attacking the fortified position directly, she suggested a strategy that would make the defenders come to them on ground of their choosing. The objective isn't to storm the fortress, she explained to her assembled team. It's to control the strategic resources. If we can create a situation where the defenders have to abandon their advantages to maintain control, we turn their strengths into weaknesses. Her plan involved using environmental features and tactical positioning to create a scenario where the automated defenders would be forced into vulnerable positions while pursuing their programming objectives. It required precise timing and coordination, but it didn't rely on overwhelming individual abilities or direct confrontation with superior force. The strategy worked brilliantly. Elena's team achieved their objectives with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency, demonstrating tactical principles that could be applied across multiple scenarios and species compositions. Their success wasn't just a victory. It was a masterclass in adaptive strategy that had observing instructors taking notes for future curriculum development. As the day concluded and cadets gathered for final assessments, Commander Vexthal found himself reevaluating everything he thought he understood about combat effectiveness and species capabilities. The human cadet who should have been the least capable individual in the group had emerged as one of the most valuable team members and tactical thinkers in the entire academy class. Elena stood among her fellow cadets, accepting congratulations and sharing insights from the day's challenges. Her expression remained modest, but that subtle smile had returned to her features. She had demonstrated something that went beyond individual achievement or species superiority. She had shown that limitations could become advantages when approached with creativity and strategic thinking. The scoreboard displayed final rankings that challenged traditional assumptions about galactic hierarchy. Elena's name appeared in the top positions not through dominance or overwhelming ability, but through consistent performance and tactical innovation that elevated everyone around her. She had proven that power wasn't just about what you could do. It was about how effectively you could think, adapt, and collaborate. As cadets dispersed to rest and reflect on the day's experiences, Elena remained behind to help with equipment storage and area cleanup. Her willingness to contribute beyond minimum requirements, even after a grueling day of trials, demonstrated the same collaborative spirit that had characterized her entire performance. Commander Vexthal approached as she finished securing the last of the training equipment. His expression had shifted from dismissive tolerance to genuine professional respect. The human had challenged his assumptions and forced him to reconsider what made an effective warrior in an age where raw power was becoming less important than tactical adaptability. "Cadet Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying a note of curiosity that hadn't been present that morning. "Your performance today was illuminating. I find myself questioning some fundamental assumptions about combat effectiveness and species capabilities." Elena looked up from her work, her expression respectful but not deferential. "Thank you, sir. It was an excellent training exercise. The scenarios were well designed to test adaptability under constraints." "Indeed. And your adaptability was remarkable." Vexthal paused, studying her with his multifaceted eyes. "Tell me, do you believe your species' apparent limitations actually provide certain advantages that more gifted species might lack?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond individual performance assessments. Elena considered her response carefully, aware that her words might influence how humans were perceived and treated throughout the galactic community. "I think every species develops differently based on their environmental pressures and natural capabilities," she said finally. "What looks like a limitation from one perspective might be a different kind of strength from another. Humans learn to solve problems creatively because we couldn't solve them through power alone. That approach has served us well in many situations." Her diplomatic answer carried deeper truths about adaptation, survival, and the unexpected advantages that could emerge from apparent disadvantages. As the conversation concluded and they went their separate ways, both cadet and instructor carried new perspectives that would influence their understanding of capability and potential for years to come. The Academy's training facility settled into evening quiet, its advanced systems powering down after a day that had challenged assumptions and revealed hidden potentials. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities for growth. But today had established foundations that would reshape how effectiveness and capability were understood and measured. Elena's performance had been more than just individual achievement. It had been a demonstration that strength came in many forms, that limitations could foster innovation, and that the most powerful abilities weren't always the most obvious ones. The implications of these insights would ripple through academy training protocols and galactic military doctrine for generations to come. 3 weeks after the academy trials, Elena found herself assigned to the Starfire Division's Advanced Tactical Unit aboard the Dreadnought Sovereign's Edge. The assignment raised eyebrows throughout the Academy's administrative hierarchy. Traditionally, the Starfire Division recruited exclusively from species with demonstrated combat advantages. Xanthari electromagnetic manipulators, Void Walker dimensional specialists, and Drakmar shock troopers whose natural armor made them ideal for hostile boarding operations. Captain Thane Corvanis, a veteran Xanthari commander with over 2 centuries of combat experience, reviewed Elena's file with barely concealed skepticism. His electromagnetic field crackled with subtle irritation as he studied the holographic display showing her academy performance metrics. The human scores were impressive, but numbers on a screen couldn't capture the intangible qualities that made the difference between competent soldiers and legendary warriors. Command insists that this human cadet represents a new paradigm in tactical thinking, Corvanis muttered to his second-in-command, a Drakmar female named Vexera whose scales shifted to deep blue indicating professional interest. They claim her performance during the No Powers trials demonstrates capabilities that traditional recruitment protocols fail to identify. Vexera studied Elena's video recordings from the Academy trials, her enhanced eyes analyzing movement patterns and decision-making processes with predatory focus. Her tactical adaptability is remarkable for such a young species. The way she turned limitations into advantages during team exercises suggests a cognitive flexibility that could prove valuable in unconventional scenarios. Perhaps, Corvanis conceded, though his tone remained dubious. But the Starfire Division faces threats that require more than creative thinking. We board hostile vessels, clear fortified positions, and engage enemy forces in direct combat, where hesitation means death. Tactical brilliance means nothing if you lack the physical capability to execute under extreme pressure. The Sovereign's Edge hummed with barely contained power as it traveled through hyperspace toward the Kepler frontier, where reports of unknown hostiles had prompted deployment of the galaxy's most elite military units. The massive vessel housed representatives from dozens of species, each contributing their unique capabilities to humanity's first major joint military operation since joining the Galactic Coalition. Elena reported to the Starfire Division's briefing room precisely on schedule, her standard-issue combat gear meticulously maintained, and her expression calm despite the obvious scrutiny from her new squadmates. The assembled team represented the cream of galactic military talent. Nexus Prime, the Void Walker whose dimensional manipulation made him ideal for infiltration operations, Kythera and her twin Syphax, ethereal energy beings whose combined consciousness could coordinate complex tactical maneuvers, and Drakmar Sergeant Vexera, whose tactical expertise complemented her species' natural combat advantages. So this is our new strategic consultant, observed Nexus Prime, his form shifting slightly as he examined Elena from multiple dimensional angles simultaneously. Command claims you can enhance our operational effectiveness through improved tactical coordination. Elena nodded respectfully, choosing her words carefully. I'm here to contribute, however, I can. My academy instructors believe that diverse perspectives improve team performance, especially in scenarios where traditional approaches might prove insufficient. Diverse perspectives, repeated Syphax with subtle amusement. An interesting euphemism for species without natural combat capabilities. Her twin, Kythera, projected gentle disapproval through their shared consciousness, but the observation hung in the air nevertheless. Captain Corvanis called the briefing to order, activating holographic displays that revealed their mission parameters. Intelligence reports indicated that several Coalition survey vessels had disappeared in the Kepler system under circumstances that suggested hostile action rather than natural disasters or equipment failures. The enemy's identity, capabilities, and intentions remained unknown, requiring a reconnaissance-in-force operation to gather intelligence while maintaining combat readiness. Our primary objective is information gathering, Corvanis explained, his electromagnetic field highlighting key tactical positions on the system map. Secondary objectives include rescue of any surviving coalition personnel and assessment of hostile capabilities for future strategic planning. The unknown nature of our opponents makes this operation particularly challenging. Elena studied the mission parameters with the same methodical attention she had demonstrated during Academy trials. The sparse intelligence data created a tactical puzzle that traditional power-based approaches might find difficult to solve effectively. Without understanding enemy capabilities and limitations, overwhelming force could prove counterproductive or insufficient. Sir, may I suggest a phased approach that prioritizes intelligence gathering before committing to direct engagement? Elena's question drew surprised looks from several team members who had expected her to remain quietly deferential during her first mission briefing. Corvanis gestured for her to continue, his professional curiosity overriding his personal skepticism. Explain your reasoning, Cadet. Unknown opponents present the greatest risk when we make assumptions based on familiar patterns, Elena said, highlighting specific sections of the tactical display. If we approach this as a standard reconnaissance operation, we might overlook capabilities or strategies that don't fit conventional frameworks. A more adaptive approach could provide better intelligence while reducing exposure to unknown threats. Her suggestion involved using sensor drones and automated reconnaissance platforms to gather detailed environmental and tactical data before committing organic assets to potential combat situations. The approach emphasized information superiority and tactical flexibility over immediate force projection, allowing the team to adapt their strategies based on observed enemy capabilities. Interesting, mused Vexera, her scales shifting to indicate professional consideration. The approach prioritizes learning over engaging, which could provide significant advantages when facing unknown opponents. Nexus Prime nodded slowly, his dimensional perception allowing him to visualize multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously. The strategy acknowledges that our standard advantages might not apply against enemies whose capabilities we don't understand. It's actually quite logical. Captain Corvanis found himself reconsidering his initial assessment of the human cadet. Her suggestion demonstrated strategic thinking that went beyond simple tactical execution, addressing fundamental challenges of operating in information-poor environments. The approach wasn't flashy or dependent on superior capabilities, but it was thoroughly professional and potentially more effective than conventional alternatives. We'll incorporate your recommendations into our operational framework, Corvanis decided, noting the surprised expressions from team members who had expected him to dismiss the newcomer's input. However, remember that reconnaissance often becomes combat without warning. Your tactical insights are valuable, but they must be backed by operational capability when the situation demands it. Elena accepted the challenge with quiet confidence that impressed even skeptical observers. Understood, sir. I'm prepared to contribute operationally as well as strategically. The Sovereign's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, its massive sensor arrays immediately beginning detailed scans of local space. The initial data confirmed intelligence reports. Debris fields marked the locations where coalition vessels had met their fate, but the scattered wreckage provided few clues about the nature of their attackers. Elena volunteered for the preliminary reconnaissance mission that would take a small team to investigate the nearest debris field. Her suggestion to include passive scanning equipment and adaptive sensor protocols demonstrated the same thorough approach that had characterized her Academy performance. The mission would provide her first opportunity to demonstrate operational capability alongside strategic insight. The reconnaissance team's transport craft approached the debris field with sensors extended and weapons systems ready for immediate deployment. Elena operated the passive scanning equipment with practiced efficiency, gathering data about weapon signatures, hull composition, and destruction patterns that might reveal information about their unknown enemies. These blast patterns are unusual, she observed, analyzing the data streams flowing across her console. The energy signatures don't match any known weapon systems in coalition databases, but The destruction patterns suggest precise targeting rather than overwhelming force. Sergeant Vexera examined Elena's analysis with professional interest, her enhanced senses confirming the human's observations. The attackers knew exactly how to disable these vessels efficiently. This suggests either detailed intelligence about coalition ship designs or adaptive targeting systems that can identify critical vulnerabilities in real time. The implications were concerning. Either their enemies had access to classified coalition technical data, or they possessed analytical capabilities that could identify and exploit weaknesses during combat. Both possibilities suggested opponents far more sophisticated than typical raiders or hostile species encountered during expansion operations. Nexus Prime's dimensional senses detected something that conventional sensors had missed. There are temporal distortions around several debris concentrations. The destruction patterns indicate that some sections were hit before others, but the temporal signatures suggest simultaneous attacks across multiple dimensional phases. Elena processed this information through her tactical framework, identifying patterns that suggested coordinated attacks using technology that operated outside normal space-time parameters. The enemy's capabilities included not just advanced weapons, but exotic technologies that could bypass conventional defensive measures. Sir, I recommend we expand our sensor sweep to include subspace and dimensional scanning frequencies, Elena suggested, her fingers dancing across the control interface. If our opponents are using multidimensional attack strategies, we need to understand their capabilities before they detect our presence. Her recommendation proved prescient when the enhanced sensor sweep revealed energy signatures that would have been invisible to standard reconnaissance protocols. The signatures suggested the presence of cloaked vessels using dimensional phasing technology to remain hidden within normal space while maintaining the ability to attack without warning. Contact, announced Kithara, her energy form flickering with excitement and concern. Multiple unknown vessels decloaking at bearing 27 Mark IV. Configuration unknown, but energy signatures indicate significant hostile capability. The reconnaissance team found themselves facing their first direct encounter with the unknown enemy. 3 vessels of unfamiliar design materialized from dimensional fold space, their hulls gleaming with energy patterns that defied easy classification. The ships moved with fluid grace that suggested organic design principles, but their weapon systems charged with the precision of advanced technological systems. Elena's training took over as combat scenarios became reality. She coordinated sensor data collection while maintaining tactical awareness of their deteriorating situation. The enemy vessels demonstrated capabilities that combined the best aspects of organic adaptability and technological precision, creating opponents unlike anything in coalition databases. Their targeting systems are adapting to our defensive patterns in real time, she reported, her voice steady despite the increasing urgency of their situation. Recommended evasive action pattern Delta 7 Alpha with randomized interval modifications to prevent predictive targeting. Captain Corvanis implemented Elena's suggestions while engaging the enemy with his electromagnetic manipulation capabilities. The human's tactical recommendations proved effective at maintaining survivability against opponents whose adaptive systems had been designed to counter conventional responses. The engagement lasted only minutes, but it provided crucial intelligence about enemy capabilities and strategic objectives. The unknown vessels demonstrated superior technology in multiple areas, but they also showed patterns of behavior that suggested specific tactical doctrines and operational limitations. Elena documented everything, her analytical mind processing combat data even while managing her assigned operational responsibilities. The enemy's approach to engagement suggested they were testing coalition capabilities rather than attempting to achieve decisive victory, which implied strategic objectives beyond simple territorial expansion or resource acquisition. They're studying us, she realized as the enemy vessels withdrew as suddenly as they had appeared. This wasn't an attack designed to destroy or capture. It was a reconnaissance mission disguised as an engagement. Her insight reframed the entire encounter in strategic terms that had significant implications for coalition defensive planning. If the enemy was conducting systematic intelligence gathering operations, it suggested a larger campaign in preparation, with coalition forces as the primary target. The reconnaissance team returned to the Sovereign's Edge with intelligence that confirmed the presence of a sophisticated enemy force operating in the Kepler system. Elena's performance during the encounter had impressed even skeptical team members, demonstrating operational capability that matched her strategic insights. "Your tactical recommendations kept us alive out there," acknowledged Nexus Prime as they debriefed in the ship's briefing room. The adaptive evasion patterns prevented their targeting systems from achieving lock-on during critical moments. Sergeant Vexera nodded agreement, her scales displaying colors that indicated professional respect. "More importantly, your analytical framework helped us understand what we were facing. Without that insight, we might have misinterpreted their intentions and responded inappropriately." Captain Corvanis found himself genuinely impressed by Elena's performance under pressure. The human had demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking and operational competence that made the difference between successful missions and catastrophic failures. Her capabilities weren't flashy or overwhelming, but they were exactly what elite military units needed to succeed in complex environments. "Cadet Vasquez, I'm recommending you for full integration into the Starfire Division," Corvanis announced, his electromagnetic field flickering with approval. "Your performance today demonstrated that strategic thinking and operational adaptability can be just as valuable as traditional combat advantages." Elena accepted the recognition with quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had proven herself through performance rather than rhetoric. The mission had demonstrated that humans could contribute meaningfully to galactic military operations, not despite their limitations, but because of how those limitations had shaped their approach to problem-solving. As the Sovereign's Edge prepared for deeper penetration into the Kepler system, Elena found herself fully integrated into the team's operational planning process. Her unique perspective had become valuable enough that other species actively sought her input on tactical decisions, recognizing that her human approach to problem-solving could provide advantages that traditional methods might miss. The enemy they faced remained mysterious and dangerous, but Elena had helped establish the foundation for understanding their capabilities and intentions. The real test would come when the Starfire Division moved beyond reconnaissance into active engagement with opponents whose technology and tactics challenged everything the Coalition thought it knew about warfare. The journey into the Kepler system's inner regions would test every member of the team, but Elena felt confident in her ability to contribute meaningfully to their success. She had proven that humans belonged among the galaxy's elite warriors, not through raw power but through the kind of tactical innovation and adaptive thinking that made good soldiers into great ones. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of the Kepler system, but the role that humanity would play in galactic affairs for generations to come. Elena stood ready to face whatever challenges awaited, armed with nothing more than human ingenuity and the growing respect of teammates who had learned to value strategic thinking as much as supernatural abilities. The Kepler system's inner regions revealed secrets that challenged everything the Coalition understood about interstellar warfare. As the Sovereign's Edge advanced through the asteroid fields and gas giant orbital zones, long-range sensors detected massive structures that defied conventional classification. The enemy had constructed installations that combined organic architecture with technological precision, creating defensive positions that seemed to grow and adapt to changing tactical requirements. Elena stood in the ship's primary tactical center, her workstation displaying multi-dimensional analysis of the enemy constructions. The structures exhibited properties that suggested they could reshape themselves in response to specific threats, making traditional assault planning nearly impossible. Standard Coalition doctrine emphasized overwhelming force against fixed positions, but these installations challenged that approach by refusing to remain fixed. "The defensive arrays are reconfiguring in real time," she reported to Captain Corvanis, highlighting sections of the tactical display where energy patterns shifted and architectural elements rearranged themselves. "They're not just adapting to our presence, they're anticipating potential attack vectors and repositioning accordingly." Commander Vexthal, who had joined the mission as strategic advisor, studied Elena's analysis with professional fascination. His initial skepticism about human capabilities had transformed into genuine respect during their journey through the system. The human's ability to identify patterns and develop counter-strategies had proven invaluable against opponents whose tactics defied conventional understanding. This suggests intelligence systems that can predict coalition tactical doctrine with remarkable accuracy, Vexthal observed, his electromagnetic field crackling with concern. They know how we think, how we plan, and how we execute operations. Traditional approaches may prove not just ineffective, but actively counterproductive. The Starfire Division had grown into a cohesive unit during their weeks of reconnaissance operations. Elena's integration had been smoother than anyone expected, her tactical insights earning respect from teammates who initially viewed her as a liability. Nexus Prime's dimensional perception complemented her strategic analysis, while the ethereal twins provided computational support that enhanced her pattern recognition capabilities. "We need a completely different approach," Elena suggested, manipulating the tactical display to show alternative strategic frameworks. "Instead of trying to overcome their adaptive defenses through force, we could use their adaptability against them. If they're programmed to counter specific tactical patterns, we can feed them false information and exploit their predictive responses." Her proposal involved a complex deception operation that would present the enemy with apparent coalition tactical patterns while concealing the actual attack strategy. The approach required precise coordination and timing, but it offered the possibility of achieving strategic objectives against opponents whose defensive systems seemed impregnable. Sergeant Vexera leaned forward, her scales shifting to indicate intense interest. "Explain the operational requirements for this deception strategy." Elena outlined a multi-phase plan that would use diversionary attacks and false tactical signatures to convince the enemy that coalition forces were implementing conventional assault patterns. Meanwhile, the real attack would exploit blind spots created by the enemy's focus on countering the apparent threat. The strategy required sacrifice of tactical surprise for strategic deception, trading immediate advantages for long-term positioning. "The key is understanding their decision-making algorithms," Elena explained, highlighting specific sections of her analysis. "They're responding to our actions with mechanical precision, which suggests programmed responses rather than creative intelligence. If we can identify their programming limitations, we can create scenarios where their adaptive responses work against their own defensive objectives." Captain Corvanis found himself once again impressed by Elena's ability to think beyond conventional frameworks. The human's approach to tactical problems consistently revealed solutions that more powerful species missed, not through superior capability but through different cognitive approaches to complex challenges. "The plan is ambitious and risky," he acknowledged, studying Elena's operational framework. "Failure would expose our forces to concentrated enemy fire with minimal defensive options. Success would require perfect timing and coordination across multiple engagement vectors." "Yes, sir," Elena agreed, her expression serious but confident. "But conventional approaches have already proven ineffective. The enemy's adaptive defenses can counter anything in our standard tactical playbook. This strategy offers our best chance of achieving operational objectives against opponents who know exactly how to defend against traditional coalition tactics." The decision to implement Elena's strategy required approval from Fleet Command, but the reconnaissance data supported her assessment of enemy capabilities. Traditional assault patterns would likely result in massive casualties with minimal strategic gains, while her deception operation offered the possibility of achieving decisive results through tactical innovation. Admiral Thexera, the Drakmar fleet commander coordinating the Kepler operation, reviewed Elena's proposal with the skepticism typical of senior officers faced with unconventional strategies. Her species' warrior traditions emphasized direct confrontation and overwhelming force, making Elena's subtle approach seem unnecessarily complex. "This human proposes that we sacrifice tactical advantages for strategic misdirection," the Admiral observed during the command briefing. "The plan requires our forces to appear vulnerable while maintaining actual combat effectiveness through concealment and timing. The margin for error is minimal." Elena stood before the assembled senior officers representing multiple species and tactical doctrines, her presence a reminder of how dramatically coalition military thinking had evolved. 6 months earlier, no human would have been included in strategic planning sessions involving galactic security. Now, her insights were actively sought by commanders who had learned to value innovative thinking as much as traditional military advantages. Admiral, the enemy has demonstrated superior adaptive technology and detailed knowledge of coalition tactical doctrine, Elena responded respectfully. Conventional approaches play to their strengths while negating our advantages. This strategy leverages human cognitive flexibility against their programmed responses, creating opportunities that traditional methods cannot achieve. The Admiral's expression remained skeptical, but other senior officers showed growing interest in Elena's unconventional approach. Commander Zefkol, a void walker whose species specialized in dimensional warfare, leaned forward with obvious curiosity about the tactical implications. The human's analysis suggests that enemy adaptive systems are actually vulnerabilities if approached correctly, Zefkol observed. Their predictive responses become liabilities when fed false information designed to trigger specific defensive configurations. Elena nodded, activating detailed holographic displays that showed how enemy defensive patterns could be manipulated through carefully orchestrated deception operations. The key is understanding that their adaptability follows algorithmic patterns. They're not truly creative, they're just very sophisticated at pattern matching and response modification. Her analysis revealed that the enemy's greatest strength could become their greatest weakness if coalition forces could present them with tactical scenarios that triggered inappropriate responses. The deception operation would essentially hack their defensive algorithms by feeding them data designed to produce suboptimal strategic decisions. Admiral Thexera studied the proposal for several long minutes, her enhanced cognitive processes evaluating tactical scenarios and probability calculations. The plan was undeniably risky, but it offered strategic possibilities that conventional approaches could not match. More importantly, it demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking that might be necessary against opponents whose technology surpassed traditional coalition capabilities. Very well, the Admiral decided, her scales shifting to indicate reluctant approval. We will implement your deception strategy, but with significant modifications to reduce operational risk. The Starfire Division will lead the primary deception operation while fleet elements provide support and backup engagement capabilities. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with apprehension. Her strategy had been approved, but now she would be responsible for its execution under combat conditions where failure could cost thousands of lives. The weight of command responsibility was something her academy training had discussed in theoretical terms, but reality carried emotional dimensions that no simulation could replicate. Preparation for the deception operation required coordination across multiple ship classes and species capabilities. Elena found herself working closely with tactical officers whose natural abilities far exceeded human limitations, but whose strategic thinking had been shaped by entirely different cognitive frameworks. The collaboration revealed strengths and limitations in both human and alien approaches to complex problem-solving. The ethereal twins, Kythera and Syphax, proved particularly valuable for operational coordination. Their shared consciousness allowed them to process multiple data streams simultaneously while maintaining perfect communication synchronization. Elena's strategic framework, combined with their processing capabilities, created a tactical analysis system that could adapt to changing conditions in real time. Your species' approach to uncertainty is fascinating, observed Kythera during one of their planning sessions. Most species seek to eliminate unknowns through superior capability or technology. Humans seem to embrace uncertainty as a tool for creating strategic opportunities. Elena considered the observation while reviewing operational timelines for their upcoming mission. Uncertainty affects everyone equally, but reactions to uncertainty vary significantly. If you can remain effective while your opponents become paralyzed by unknown factors, uncertainty becomes a tactical advantage rather than a limitation. The insight reflected a fundamental difference in how humans had evolved to handle complex environments compared to species with natural advantages. Where others sought control through power, humans had learned to find opportunities within chaos and unpredictability. Nexus Prime contributed his dimensional manipulation capabilities to the deception operation by creating false sensor signatures that would convince enemy systems they were tracking coalition forces in locations where no actual ships existed. His ability to manipulate space-time on tactical scales provided the technical foundation for Elena's strategic misdirection. The dimensional signatures need to match actual coalition fleet movements precisely, Elena explained, coordinating with Nexus Prime on the technical requirements. The enemy's analytical systems are sophisticated enough to detect inconsistencies that would compromise the entire operation. Sergeant Vexera assumed responsibility for tactical coordination of actual combat units that would exploit the opportunities created by Elena's deception strategy. Her species' natural tactical instincts complemented Elena's strategic planning, creating operational frameworks that could adapt to changing conditions while maintaining strategic objectives. The timing windows will be extremely narrow, Vexera warned, studying the complex coordination requirements. Our forces will have minutes at most to exploit each tactical opportunity before enemy systems adapt to the new situation. Elena nodded, understanding that her strategy placed enormous pressure on operational execution. Success would require perfect timing, flawless coordination, and tactical flexibility when conditions inevitably deviated from planned scenarios. The human approach to uncertainty would be tested against opponents whose capabilities represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology. The operation began with long-range sensor probes that fed carefully crafted false information to enemy analytical systems. Elena monitored data streams from multiple sources, watching as enemy defensive configurations shifted in response to apparent coalition fleet movements that existed only in digital simulations. Enemy defensive arrays are repositioning according to predicted patterns, she reported, her fingers dancing across control interfaces as she managed multiple deception protocols simultaneously. They're concentrating defensive capabilities against perceived primary assault vectors while leaving secondary approach corridors relatively undefended. The first phase of the operation proceeded exactly as Elena had predicted, with enemy adaptive systems responding to false threats by creating real vulnerabilities that coalition forces could exploit. The enemy's sophisticated technology worked against them as their algorithms optimized for threats that didn't exist while ignoring actual dangers. Captain Corvanis led the primary assault team through approach vectors that enemy systems had weakened in response to Elena's false signals. His electromagnetic manipulation capabilities, combined with tactical positioning that exploited enemy blind spots, allowed coalition forces to achieve penetration of defensive perimeters that should have been impregnable. Phase 1 complete, Elena announced as coalition forces established forward positions within the enemy defensive network. Initiating Phase 2 deception protocols. The second phase required even more precise coordination as Elena manipulated enemy responses to create tactical opportunities for specific assault teams. Each deception operation lasted only minutes before enemy systems began adapting, requiring constant modification of false signals and tactical misdirection. Nexus Prime's dimensional manipulation proved crucial during this phase, as his ability to create false spatial signatures convinced enemy systems that coalition forces were attacking from directions where detection should have been impossible. The combination of Elena's strategic deception and Nexus Prime's technical capabilities created confusion within enemy analytical systems that had never been designed to handle such sophisticated misdirection. Their adaptive algorithms are starting to conflict with each other, Elena observed, watching data streams that showed enemy systems attempting to counter multiple perceived threats simultaneously. They're creating tactical blind spots by overcompensating for false signals. The third phase capitalized on enemy confusion by launching actual assaults against positions that defensive systems had abandoned while pursuing non-existent threats. Coalition forces achieved tactical objectives that conventional wisdom deemed impossible, not through superior firepower but through strategic manipulation of enemy decision-making processes. Elena coordinated the complex operation while maintaining awareness of overall strategic objectives, her tactical consciousness functioning at levels that impressed even experienced senior officers. She managed multiple deception protocols simultaneously while adapting to changing conditions and unexpected complications with cognitive flexibility that seemed effortless. The human's operational performance under pressure is remarkable, Admiral Thexera observed from the Fleet Command Center. She's managing tactical complexity that would challenge dedicated computer systems while maintaining strategic awareness of overall operational objectives. As coalition forces achieved their primary objectives within the enemy defensive network, Elena began implementing withdrawal protocols designed to preserve operational advantages while minimizing casualties. Her strategy had succeeded beyond expectations, but she understood that enemy adaptive systems would eventually overcome their initial confusion. All units begin withdrawal sequence Delta 9, she transmitted, coordinating the complex extraction operation that would preserve coalition gains while avoiding counterattack from recovering enemy systems. Maintain deception protocols until all personnel reach minimum safe distance. The operation concluded with coalition forces having achieved strategic objectives that conventional tactics could never have accomplished. Elena's deception strategy had demonstrated that tactical innovation could overcome technological superiority when applied with precise understanding of enemy limitations and psychological frameworks. As the Sovereign's Edge withdrew to safe distance for operational assessment, Elena found herself surrounded by teammates and officers who viewed her with newfound respect and admiration. Her performance had exceeded every expectation and established new standards for strategic thinking within coalition military doctrine. "You didn't just give us tactical victory," Captain Corvanis observed during the post-operation briefing. "You showed us entirely new ways of thinking about complex problems. The implications for future military doctrine are enormous." Elena accepted the praise with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her success reflected not just individual achievement, but vindication of human cognitive approaches that other species had initially dismissed as limitations. The operation had proven that different perspectives on problem-solving could provide advantages that raw power alone could never achieve. The Kepler operation continued, but Elena's role had evolved from tactical consultant to strategic architect of coalition responses to unprecedented challenges. Her success had established humans as valuable contributors to galactic military operations and opened possibilities for future cooperation that extended far beyond simple alliance obligations. The enemy remained dangerous, and their ultimate objectives remained unclear, but Elena had demonstrated that innovative thinking could overcome apparent technological disparities. The coalition now possessed strategic options that hadn't existed before human cognitive flexibility entered their tactical calculations. The enemy's response to coalition tactical innovations came swiftly and with terrifying sophistication. Within hours of Elena's successful deception operation, long-range sensors detected massive fleet movements throughout the Kepler system. The unknown adversaries had analyzed coalition strategies, identified the source of their recent defeats, and were mobilizing resources specifically designed to counter human tactical approaches. Elena studied the incoming intelligence reports with growing concern. The enemy formations showed clear adaptations to her deception techniques, with sensor arrays configured to detect false signals and defensive patterns designed to remain effective regardless of misdirection attempts. They had learned from their defeats and evolved countermeasures with speed that suggested artificial intelligence systems operating at computational levels far beyond coalition capabilities. "They're not just adapting," she reported to the Emergency Tactical Conference aboard the Sovereign's Edge. "They're specifically targeting the cognitive frameworks that make human tactical thinking effective. These new formations are designed to neutralize strategic creativity through overwhelming computational analysis." Admiral Thexera leaned forward, her Drachmer features displaying concern that transcended species barriers. The enemy's rapid adaptation threatened not just coalition forces in the Kepler system, but the fundamental strategic advantages that Elena's innovations had provided. If the enemy could neutralize human tactical approaches, coalition forces would face opponents with superior technology and no remaining strategic options. "Explain their counter-strategy," the Admiral commanded, activating detailed holographic displays of enemy fleet movements and defensive configurations. Elena highlighted specific formations that demonstrated the enemy's analytical approach to countering human innovation. They're using brute force computational methods to analyze all possible tactical variations simultaneously. Instead of responding to our actual strategies, they're preparing for every conceivable human approach and implementing defenses that work regardless of our specific choices. The implications were staggering. The enemy had essentially created a tactical framework that rendered human creativity irrelevant by preparing for all possible creative solutions in advance. Their computational capabilities allowed them to analyze strategic possibilities faster than human minds could generate them, eliminating the uncertainty and unpredictability that Elena had used to achieve previous victories. Commander Vexthal studied the enemy formations with professional admiration tinged by deep concern. This approach requires computational resources that exceed anything in coalition databases. They're essentially running tactical simulations for millions of possible scenarios simultaneously and implementing defenses that work against all of them. Captain Corvani's activated additional sensor displays showing the full scope of enemy preparations. Massive computational arrays had been deployed throughout the system, their processing power dedicated entirely to analyzing and countering coalition tactical options. The enemy had transformed the entire Kepler system into a computational warfare laboratory designed specifically to neutralize human strategic advantages. Our tactical innovations have been neutralized before we can implement them, Corvani's observed grimly. They're not just countering our strategies, they're preventing us from developing new ones by calculating and defending against them faster than we can think. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. Her innovations had given coalition forces temporary advantages, but they had also revealed human cognitive patterns to an enemy with computational capabilities that could analyze and counter those patterns in real time. Her success had inadvertently provided the enemy with the data they needed to eliminate human tactical effectiveness. "There's something we're missing," Elena said quietly, her analytical mind working through the tactical data with desperate intensity. This level of computational power should be easily detectable, but our sensors show normal energy signatures from their installations. They're either hiding massive power requirements or they're achieving these results through methods that don't require traditional computational resources. The observation triggered a cascade of analytical activity throughout the tactical center. If the enemy could achieve unprecedented computational results without corresponding energy expenditures, it suggested technologies that operated outside conventional physical frameworks. The implications for coalition understanding of physics and warfare were profound. Nexus Prime's dimensional senses detected something that conventional analysis had missed. The computational arrays aren't processing information in normal space-time, he reported, his form shifting as he examined enemy installations across multiple dimensional phases. They're using dimensional folding techniques to create computational spaces that exist outside standard physical limitations. Elena processed this information through her tactical framework, recognizing patterns that suggested entirely new approaches to both computation and warfare. The enemy wasn't just using advanced technology. They were operating according to physical principles that coalition science hadn't discovered. Their computational advantages came from accessing dimensional resources that allowed processing power to scale beyond conventional limitations. If they're using dimensional computation, then conventional counter-strategies won't work, Elena realized, her voice carrying new understanding mixed with growing excitement. But dimensional systems have their own limitations and vulnerabilities that standard computational defenses might not address. Her insight opened new tactical possibilities that played to human cognitive strengths in unexpected ways. Dimensional computation might be vastly superior to conventional processing, but it would follow different rules and exhibit different limitations. Elena's pattern recognition abilities could potentially identify vulnerabilities in dimensional systems that traditional analytical approaches would miss. The Starfire Division gathered for an emergency planning session that would determine coalition response to the enemy's computational warfare strategy. Elena found herself once again at the center of strategic planning, but this time the challenges exceeded anything she had previously faced. The enemy's capabilities threatened to make human tactical thinking obsolete through sheer computational superiority. We need to understand how dimensional computation works before we can develop counter-strategies, Elena explained to the assembled team. Traditional approaches to tactical analysis assume conventional processing limitations. If we're fighting enemies who can calculate faster than we can think, we need fundamentally different approaches. Sergeant Vexera studied Elena with renewed interest, her tactical instincts recognizing the implications of dimensional warfare. Your species' approach to uncertainty and adaptability may be our only advantage against enemies who can predict conventional responses through computational analysis. The insight reflected a crucial understanding about the nature of their conflict. The enemy's computational advantages eliminated most tactical options that depended on strategic surprise or analytical complexity. Human cognitive flexibility offered the only remaining approach that might remain effective against opponents who could outcalculate conventional military thinking. Elena began developing tactical frameworks that emphasized adaptive responses over planned strategies, recognizing that traditional military planning would be ineffective against enemies who could analyze and counter all possible plans faster than coalition forces could implement them. Her approach focused on maintaining tactical flexibility that could respond to changing conditions without depending on predetermined strategic frameworks. We need to fight without plans, she explained to skeptical senior officers who had spent careers mastering traditional military doctrine. Every strategy we develop in advance gives their computational systems more data to analyze and counter. We need tactical approaches that can adapt to conditions faster than their analytical capabilities can process and respond to changing circumstances. The concept challenged fundamental assumptions about military planning that had guided galactic warfare for millennia. Every species had developed strategic doctrines that emphasized careful planning, detailed analysis, and systematic execution of predetermined tactical frameworks. Elena's approach abandoned those principles in favor of adaptive responses that remained effective despite computational analysis. Admiral Vexera struggled with the implications of Elena's recommendations. Abandoning strategic planning seemed like chaos rather than military doctrine, but conventional approaches had proven ineffective against enemies whose computational capabilities could analyze and counter traditional tactics faster than coalition forces could implement them. How do we coordinate military operations without strategic planning? The Admiral demanded, her professional training in conflict with the necessity of abandoning proven methods. Effective warfare requires coordination between multiple units and species capabilities. Improvisation cannot substitute for systematic strategic frameworks. Elena had anticipated this concern and developed responses that addressed military coordination requirements while maintaining adaptive flexibility. We use general tactical principles instead of specific strategic plans. Each unit receives broad operational objectives and develops responses based on local conditions and enemy actions. Coordination happens through shared principles rather than detailed, predetermined strategies. Her approach required trust in individual unit capabilities and tactical judgment that many senior officers found uncomfortable. Traditional military hierarchies depended on centralized planning and detailed command structures that Elena's methods would necessarily abandon in favor of distributed decision-making and adaptive responses. The debate over tactical doctrine continued for hours, with representatives from multiple species and military traditions arguing about the wisdom of abandoning proven strategic frameworks. Elena found herself defending approaches that challenged millennia of galactic military evolution, but the enemy's computational advantages made conventional methods impractical. The enemy has forced us to choose between tactical orthodoxy and operational effectiveness, Elena pointed out during a particularly heated discussion. We can maintain traditional strategic approaches and face certain defeat, or we can adapt our methods to remain effective against opponents whose capabilities exceed our analytical resources. Captain Corvanis supported Elena's position with arguments based on their recent combat experiences. The enemy's computational warfare had rendered traditional coalition tactics obsolete, leaving adaptive improvisation as the only remaining option for achieving military objectives. Elena's methods offered the best chance for maintaining operational capability against vastly superior analytical resources. The final decision came from Admiral Thexera after extensive consultation with Fleet Command and strategic advisors from multiple species. Coalition forces would implement Elena's adaptive tactical doctrine as an experimental approach to dimensional computational warfare, acknowledging that conventional methods had proven insufficient against enemies whose capabilities exceeded traditional military frameworks. We are authorizing the most radical departure from established military doctrine in galactic history, the Admiral announced during the fleet-wide briefing that would inform all Coalition personnel about their new operational parameters. Our survival depends on abandoning strategic certainty in favor of tactical adaptability. Elena felt both pride and apprehension as Coalition forces prepared to implement her revolutionary tactical approaches. Her methods represented humanity's contribution to galactic military doctrine, but they had never been tested against enemies whose dimensional computational capabilities could potentially analyze and counter even adaptive strategies. The first test of Elena's new tactical doctrine came when enemy forces launched a coordinated assault designed to exploit Coalition strategic planning vulnerabilities. The attack demonstrated sophisticated understanding of traditional military coordination methods, with timing and positioning that should have overwhelmed any conventionally planned defensive response. Coalition forces responded with Elena's adaptive methods, implementing tactical responses based on local conditions rather than predetermined strategic frameworks. Individual units made decisions based on immediate tactical requirements, while maintaining general operational objectives through shared principles rather than detailed coordination protocols. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Enemy computational systems, designed to analyze and counter-plan strategies, found themselves facing tactical responses that emerged from local conditions rather than strategic frameworks that could be predicted and countered. Coalition forces achieved defensive effectiveness that surprised even Elena, who had hoped her methods would prove viable but hadn't expected such dramatic success. Their analytical systems can't predict our responses because we're not using predictable strategic frameworks, Elena observed as Coalition forces successfully repelled enemy attacks that should have achieved decisive victory. They're trying to analyze our plans, but we're not following plans. We're responding to conditions they're creating, which means their own actions are generating the tactical solutions we implement against them. The insight revealed a fundamental vulnerability in the enemy's computational warfare approach. Their analytical systems were designed to process and counter strategic planning, but Elena's adaptive methods created tactical responses that emerged from enemy actions rather than Coalition planning. The enemy's computational advantages became liabilities when their analytical capabilities focused on predicting strategies that didn't exist. Coalition forces pressed their unexpected advantages, implementing adaptive tactical operations that exploited enemy computational vulnerabilities while avoiding the strategic planning that their analytical systems could process and counter. Elena's methods had transformed the conflict from computational warfare to cognitive flexibility, playing to human strengths while neutralizing enemy technological advantages. The battle for the Kepler system continued, but Elena's adaptive tactical doctrine had restored Coalition operational effectiveness against enemies whose capabilities had seemed insurmountable. Her contributions to galactic military thinking represented more than individual achievement. They demonstrated that human cognitive approaches could provide strategic advantages that no amount of technological superiority could overcome. As the immediate crisis stabilized, Elena began developing advanced tactical frameworks that would extend her adaptive principles to larger strategic scales. The enemy's computational warfare had been neutralized, but the broader conflict required systematic approaches to cognitive flexibility that could be implemented across the entire Coalition military structure. The transformation of galactic military doctrine had begun with a single human cadet whose limitations had forced her to develop innovative approaches to tactical thinking. Elena's journey from academy outsider to strategic architect reflected humanity's potential contribution to galactic civilization, proving that every species brought unique advantages that could benefit the broader community when properly understood and implemented. The war was far from over, but Elena had demonstrated that human tactical thinking could overcome any technological disadvantage through cognitive flexibility and adaptive strategic approaches. Her methods would influence galactic military doctrine for generations, establishing humans as valuable partners in the ongoing struggle to maintain peace and stability throughout the known galaxy. 6 months after the Kepler campaign, Elena stood before the assembled Galactic Defense Council in the crystalline chambers of the Coalition's primary military headquarters. The massive chamber represented the pinnacle of interspecies cooperation, with architectural elements from dozens of worlds creating a space that honored every member civilization while maintaining functional unity. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to address the fundamental changes that Elena's tactical innovations had introduced to military doctrine. The transformation had been unprecedented. Elena's adaptive strategies had spread throughout coalition forces, changing how battles were fought from the smallest unit actions to massive fleet engagements. Traditional military academies had revised their curricula to include human cognitive approaches alongside species-specific combat techniques. The galaxy's understanding of tactical effectiveness had evolved to embrace flexibility and innovation alongside raw power and technological superiority. Fleet Admiral Corinth, a Zenthari whose electromagnetic manipulation had been legendary throughout the galaxy for over 4 centuries, addressed the assembly with words that would have been unthinkable just 1 year earlier. The integration of human tactical doctrine has revolutionized our approach to military operations across all theaters of conflict. What began as experimental adaptation to unique circumstances has become fundamental to coalition military effectiveness. Elena listened from her position among the senior tactical advisors, still somewhat surprised by her rapid advancement through coalition military hierarchy. Her promotion from Academy Cadet to Strategic Doctrine Coordinator had occurred faster than anyone expected, driven by results that spoke louder than traditional qualification requirements. Species barriers had dissolved under the pressure of operational necessity and proven effectiveness. The Kepler campaign had concluded with decisive coalition victory, but the enemy's identity and ultimate objectives remained mysterious. Their dimensional computational technology had provided glimpses into scientific principles that exceeded coalition understanding, suggesting civilizations with access to physical laws that current galactic science hadn't discovered. The implications extended far beyond military applications. The enemy's withdrawal from Kepler space appears complete, reported Commander Nexus Prime, whose dimensional senses had become crucial for monitoring potential threats that operated outside normal spacetime parameters. However, their technology demonstrates capabilities that suggest we are facing opponents whose scientific advancement exceeds our current understanding by orders of magnitude. Elena had spent months analyzing captured enemy technology and tactical data, working with scientific teams from multiple species to understand the principles behind dimensional computation and exotic defense systems. The research had revealed that their opponents were using physics that coalition science couldn't explain, raising questions about the true scope of technological development possible within the known universe. Their computational arrays operated according to principles that violate our understanding of information processing and energy conservation, Elena explained to the assembled representatives. They achieved analytical capabilities that should require resources exceeding the power output of entire star systems. But they did so through dimensional manipulation that bypasses conventional physical limitations. The implications were staggering. If dimensional technology could provide unlimited computational resources, it might also enable other capabilities that could reshape galactic civilization. Energy generation, transportation, communication, and manufacturing could all be revolutionized through access to dimensional manipulation techniques that the enemy had demonstrated. Dr. Vexthara, the Coalition's leading theoretical physicist and Elena's frequent research collaborator, presented analysis that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological development. The enemy's dimensional systems suggest that our current understanding of physics represents only a small fraction of what might be possible. Their withdrawal from Kepler space may indicate that they achieved their research objectives rather than suffered military defeat. Elena nodded agreement with the assessment, having reached similar conclusions through tactical analysis of enemy behavior patterns. Their engagement strategy was consistent with intelligence gathering rather than territorial acquisition or resource exploitation. They tested our capabilities, analyzed our responses, and collected data about coalition military doctrine and technological capabilities. The realization that the Kepler campaign had been essentially a large-scale scientific experiment rather than conventional warfare added new dimensions of concern to strategic planning. If their opponents were conducting systematic research on coalition capabilities, it suggested preparation for conflicts that could dwarf anything previously experienced in galactic history. Admiral Thexera, whose initial skepticism about human capabilities had transformed into professional respect and personal friendship, addressed the strategic implications of their discoveries. We must assume that our opponents now possess detailed understanding of coalition military doctrine, technological capabilities, and tactical approaches. Any future conflicts will require completely new strategic frameworks. Elena had been developing those frameworks for months, working with tactical experts from multiple species to create military doctrines that could remain effective against opponents with superior technology and detailed intelligence about coalition capabilities. The challenge required fundamental changes to how galactic military forces approach training, planning, and operational coordination. The key insight is that technological superiority becomes irrelevant when opponents can adapt faster than technology can be deployed, Elena explained, activating holographic displays that showed her advanced tactical concepts. We need military doctrines that emphasize cognitive flexibility and adaptive decision-making over predetermined strategic frameworks and technological advantages. Her proposals represented the most radical transformation of galactic military thinking in recorded history. Traditional approaches that emphasized species advantages and technological superiority would be replaced by adaptive methods that could remain effective regardless of enemy capabilities or intelligence advantages. The changes would require retraining military personnel throughout coalition space. The ethereal representative, a being of pure energy whose species had contributed some of the galaxy's most advanced computational technologies, expressed concerns that reflected broader anxiety about abandoning proven methods. The proposed changes require abandoning military doctrines that have maintained galactic peace for millennia. How do we ensure that revolutionary tactical approaches don't destabilize the strategic balance that has prevented major conflicts between coalition members? Elena had anticipated this concern and developed responses that addressed interspecies cooperation and conflict prevention alongside military effectiveness against external threats. The adaptive principles that work against unknown enemies also improve cooperation between coalition species with different capabilities and tactical traditions. Cognitive flexibility enhances collaboration rather than threatening it. Her insight reflected deep understanding of how human tactical approaches had influenced relationships between coalition species during their months of collaboration. Elena's methods had brought together military personnel from different worlds and traditions, creating operational effectiveness that exceeded the sum of individual species' capabilities. Captain Corvanis, whose electromagnetic manipulation had been enhanced rather than replaced by human tactical innovations, supported Elena's assessment with examples from their joint operations. The integration of human cognitive approaches has improved our understanding of other species' capabilities while developing new applications for traditional advantages. Cooperation has increased rather than decreased. The discussion continued for hours as representatives debated the wisdom of implementing Elena's revolutionary changes throughout coalition military forces. The proposals required fundamental alterations to training programs, command structures, and operational doctrines that had guided galactic warfare for thousands of years. Elena found herself at the center of debates that would shape military development for generations, defending approaches that challenged traditional assumptions while addressing concerns from species whose entire military traditions were built on different principles. Her human perspective on cognitive flexibility was being tested against millennia of galactic military evolution. The final decision came from Grand Admiral Zepthul, the Coalition's supreme military commander whose species had developed some of the galaxy's most sophisticated strategic thinking. His support for Elena's proposals carried weight that transcended individual species' loyalties and political considerations. The human has demonstrated that tactical innovation can overcome any technological disadvantage, the Grand Admiral announced to the assembled representatives. Her methods have proven effective against opponents whose capabilities exceeded our combined technological resources. We will implement her adaptive doctrine throughout coalition military forces. Elena felt a mixture of pride and responsibility as the galaxy's military leadership committed to implementing her strategic innovations on an unprecedented scale. Her journey from academy outsider to architect of galactic military doctrine represented not just personal achievement, but validation of human cognitive approaches that had initially been dismissed as limitations. The implementation process required coordination across hundreds of worlds and dozens of species, each with their own military traditions and technological capabilities. Elena worked with training specialists and tactical experts to develop curricula that would integrate adaptive thinking with existing advantages rather than replacing them entirely. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Species that had previously struggled with inter-service cooperation found that Elena's cognitive flexibility improved their ability to work together effectively. Military units that incorporated adaptive thinking alongside traditional advantages achieved operational capabilities that surpassed anything previously recorded in coalition military history. Elena's influence extended beyond military applications as her cognitive approaches were adapted for diplomatic negotiations, scientific research, and interspecies cooperation initiatives. Human tactical thinking had provided insights that improved galactic civilization's ability to address complex challenges through innovative problem-solving and adaptive responses. The mysterious enemy that had triggered these developments remained absent from coalition space, but their influence had fundamentally transformed galactic military capability and interspecies cooperation. Elena's response to their challenge had created strategic advantages that would benefit coalition civilization regardless of future threats or challenges. As Elena reflected on her journey from Academy Cadet to Galactic Strategic Coordinator, she recognized that her individual success represented something larger than personal achievement. Humanity had found its place among the stars not through superior technology or natural advantages, but through cognitive approaches that enhanced everyone's capabilities when properly integrated. The galaxy had learned that strength came in many forms, that limitations could foster innovation, and that diversity of thought provided advantages that no amount of technological superiority could match. Elena's tactical innovations had proven that human creativity and adaptability could contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization, establishing foundations for cooperation that would endure for generations. Standing before the massive viewports that showed stars scattered across impossible distances, Elena contemplated the future with quiet confidence. The unknown enemies who had challenged coalition capabilities had inadvertently triggered developments that strengthened galactic civilization beyond anything previously imagined. Their dimensional technology remained mysterious, but Elena's adaptive responses had prepared coalition forces for challenges that transcended conventional warfare. The Academy instructor who had dismissed human capabilities as unremarkable limitations could never have imagined how those limitations would become advantages that transformed galactic military doctrine. Elena's smirk during that first training exercise had reflected understanding that others missed. Sometimes the greatest strength came from learning to succeed despite apparent weaknesses. Her journey had proven that humans belonged among the galaxy's elite not because they possessed superior abilities, but because they had developed cognitive approaches that made everyone more effective when working together. The limitations that had seemed like disadvantages had become the foundation for innovations that benefited entire galactic civilization. Elena's story continued as she worked to refine and expand adaptive tactical doctrine for challenges that hadn't yet emerged. The galaxy was vast and full of unknowns that would require continued innovation and flexibility to address effectively. Human cognitive approaches would continue evolving and contributing to galactic capability for as long as challenges remained to be solved. The future held uncertainties that no amount of planning could predict or control, but Elena faced them with the confidence that came from understanding how limitations could become strengths when approached with creativity and adaptive thinking. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and that place was at the forefront of innovation and cognitive flexibility that would guide galactic civilization toward ever greater achievements. The Academy's training grounds where Elena had first demonstrated her capabilities now hosted advanced tactical training for personnel from across the galaxy, all learning to integrate cognitive flexibility with their natural advantages. Her influence had become institutional, ensuring that future generations would benefit from human approaches to problem-solving and strategic thinking. Elena had fulfilled the potential that few had recognized during her academy days, proving that remarkable achievements could emerge from unremarkable origins when combined with determination, creativity, and the willingness to think beyond conventional limitations. Her legacy would continue inspiring innovation and cooperation throughout galactic civilization for countless generations to come. The simple lesson that no powers in combat could reveal hidden strengths had transformed into galactic doctrine that emphasized cognitive flexibility over technological dominance. Elena's smirk had been justified by achievements that exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own, demonstrating that the greatest victories sometimes came from those who had learned to succeed against overwhelming odds.